animal based. Hopefully I won't bore you all to sleep anyway, and I'm going to have to keep dashing across the front to press the button because we're not all that technical. But as you know, some of you might have been here before, you're at Port Lympne, which is paired with Howletts. They were set up originally by this man, John Aspinall. He had a passion for animals, and so he wanted to do something slightly differently. But he was mainly known as a gambler. That's how he made his money. That's how you guys, if you go out and play bingo, that kind of thing, it's all down to this man. The law that was passed to make gambling legal is also known as the Aspinall's Law. So that's why. But he started off originally, he lived in London, and he got numerous different animals. But the way it started originally was with one animal. That was, anyone know what it is? Anyone seen Dexter at the Night Museum? Know what that is? Huh? Capuchin? There you go, Capuchin monkey. That's exactly how it started. And what he did, he came home from going out one day with a Capuchin monkey, came home to his wife and went, look what I've bought you as a present. And she went, that's nice, build it an enclosure out in the garden and it can live out there. So after a little while he got bored of the Capuchin, well not bored, but he wanted something different. Anyone got any ideas what he went for next? Rhino. A rhino in London, that definitely would have got the patents. Anyone got any ideas? Himalayan mountain bear. Two little cubs as they started out, and again he did the same thing, went home to his wife and she went, yeah, very nice, out in the garden. Anyone know what he went for next? Quite a big one that he went for, not a rhino, not that big. Gorilla, not quite, wasn't it? Tiger, someone said it. Yeah, he went for a tiger, and that was actually Tara. Tara was the main reason why these places now exist. Because with a tiger, needs a little bit more exercise than just an enclosure in the garden. So he used to take it for walks around London on a lead, which is all well and good, but you do it during the day. They go, you've got a tiger on a lead, I'm not coming near you. So he used to do it at night, until one day, came across a neighbour's dog. The Alsatian came running up to him. Tara took one swipe, and let's say the dog didn't get up. So he did the honourable thing, of course, shoved it under a bush, went home to his wife and said, we need to move. So that's exactly what they did, and that's how Howletts and Port Lympne came about. That's John Aspinall there with Tara in one of the enclosures at Howletts, and that's where he bought Howletts Mansion. Again, gambling came into play. He actually bought Howletts on a one-off because he won a horse won a race. And he was able to buy it outright. Not for a lot, not by any means. But he did something different. He made zoos a lot different. When he came around in 1957, zoos were very much like this, tiny little cages. He wanted to change that. So he went about making enclosures like this. We're actually going to go down to this enclosure later. This is the Palace of the Apes, which is just down there. And he made it bigger. All animals as well lived in literally solitary groups or a pair. Gorillas live in family groups, and that's what he did, and that's why he's had as much success with gorillas as he has, or he did, shall we say. And he also encouraged us keepers to have very good bonds with our animals, going in with them, and the gorillas and stuff. His son Damien, who's still over at Howletts, goes in with all the gorillas, well, some of them you can't go in with. So yeah, then he bought Port Lympne, which is the mansion that you're in, exactly at this time. The garden room's kind of that way. But he bought that at a later stage as well. But the role of modern zoos, like I said, it's changed a hell of a lot. So, anyone know why zoos are around? You've got it all there, it's kind of obvious. But it's conservation and preservation. We're here for a reason. We don't just want to be here because we like animals in cages. We're here to preserve the species. That's exactly why we're here. Also, to do things like we're doing now, education, teaching you guys. Some of you guys maybe might want to become keepers or scientists as your biology students. And doing that kind of stuff, genetics, all that type of thing. We also have to research, find out why the animals are disappearing, and try and stop stuff like that as well. Recreation as well, of course, but also the main reason why zoos are around and the reason we have the animals we do, because we have to save all of the species. Obviously, you've got different types of species. For example, you guys come to the zoo, what do you want to see? Exactly, big stuff. Do you want to see frogs and stuff like that? Exactly. So we have to have the big stuff in order to save the little stuff. Prime example of this, there's a whole mass extinction going on right now. Chytrid fungus is a huge fungus that's wiping out frogs at the moment. And so what's happening? It's actually the worst disease ever recorded in vertebrate species. It's in actually every continent which has amphibians on it. We don't know why it's happening. There's still scientists looking into what we can do to try and save it. But fungus, they go, it's a frog, don't care. So that's why we have the big stuff. Gorillas, rhinos, tigers. So we can put money back into projects like the frogs and that kind of stuff. So, extinction threats. There are a hell of a lot of them, which is quite scary. Alien species, prime example, red squirrels, grey squirrels. We have lots of grey squirrels. We should have, in theory, had lots of red squirrels. But they're being wiped out. You've got the bushmeat trade. I will go into a lot more detail of the bushmeat trade, but that is one of the huge threats that face the gorillas, which you guys are, of course, looking into slightly. You've got the Chinese medicine trade, which is a horrible, horrible thing. Again, I will go into a bit more detail. Climate change, most of us are the part of the reason for that as well. You've got disease, habitat loss, human-animal conflict, mining, monocultures, pet trade, and pre-depletion. So I'll go into a bit more detail of various different things. These guys are a prime example of the Chinese medicine trade. Anyone know why? What would you use for the medicine trade in rhinos? Yeah? Exactly. No. Anyone know what their horn's made of? No?
Keratin, the same in your hair.
Exactly. Same thing as our hair and our fingernails, keratin. So that's literally all it is, fingernails. And the Chinese believe that this cures a hell of a lot of diseases, ailments, all that kind of thing. But the latest thing, apparently it cures cancer. So unfortunately, rhinos poaching has skyrocketed at the moment. We've even gone to the stage here where we've got display rhino horns, and we've actually had to lock them away in our secure gunroom cupboard, which is alarmed and security controlled, all that type of thing. Because zoos in this country, Drusillas, I don't know if anyone's been there, a few months ago, were broken into, broad daylight during the day, rhino horns stolen. So that's the issues that the Chinese medicine trade face. They also, anyone know what you hunt for? Elephants.
I agree.
Exactly. Not so much of a huge thing for elephants. There are a hell of a lot of elephants at the moment. But they are trying to legalise the ivory trade again, which you have, if it's the right slide. It's not quite the right slide. It'll be there in a minute. Several things that they make ivory from, ornaments, piano keys, all that type of thing. So there's a hell of a lot of demand still for it, and they still poach a hell of a lot with elephants. But if we stop it now, when there's a huger amount of animals still there, we won't get into the situations that we do, for example, like with bongo, where there's 103 of them left in the wild, that's it. So if we start earlier, then we've got more of a chance of success. Another issue that elephants face is one of these, human-animal conflict. Elephants, of course, were there first, most of the time, most of the animals were. We've come into their land and we've got in the way, but we don't like them being where we are. So we have issues like them raiding our crops, just in your left-hand corner. And on the right, you've got an Asian elephant raiding crops. So we're trying to educate again, to teach them different ways on how to stop them, rather than just shooting them and killing them. So up on the top there, you've actually got a farmer who started a new thing, or it wasn't necessarily him, but beehives. They discovered that elephants don't like bees, they don't like the buzzing. And recently they've tried this and only one bull calf managed to get through it. So what they do, the elephant runs up to it, knocks it, the bees all come out, buzz around, they don't like it, they run off. So therefore protecting the crops. So it's a way that's actually worked. And there you go, different things that you use for ivory or that type of stuff. Another thing that the Chinese medicine trade do, does anyone know what they do with tigers? Anyone heard of tiger bone wine? Tiger balm, that kind of thing. I did a talk to a load of WI, a group of WI ladies the other week, and they all went, is tiger balm actually tigers then? Because they all brought it over from Vietnam in the war. They didn't realise, and they've all gone, I'm not going to use tiger balm anymore. That'd be good, really. So they use every single part of the tiger, from the bone, they crush it down, make it into wine. They use the balm, they use the skins, they use everything. And they've now started to farm them. But these guys originally have come from the wild. Yeah, okay, they're breeding them, so they're not taking them from the wild. But when you've crushed that tiger up, doesn't sound very nice, but that's what they do, made it into little parts, how can you tell the difference between a wild tiger and a tiger that's come from in there? If they've farmed it, they've had to feed it, rear it to that age, whereas if they've just gone out and shoot it, it's taken them 2 minutes to put that bullet in a tiger, and it's done. So you can't legalise tiger farming, and that's what the Chinese are again trying to do. They're trying to legalise it. Right, conservation focus. Right, with so many species to protect, how do we choose which species and areas to protect? It's exactly the thing I was telling you about earlier, of which we protect. So we need to protect as many as we can, but we also make sure that the money we use from the big species goes to the smaller species. So, who knows what in situ and ex situ means? Anyone got any ideas? Anyone? No? Right, well it's two different types of conservation. In situ is where they exist in the wild. Ex situ is here in the park, for example. So both have advantages and disadvantages. In situ's advantages. You're obviously protecting the species in their natural habitat, which is a bonus of course. You're also protecting the habitat they're in, and you're protecting multiple species and ecosystems. So, for example, we've got our projects out in the Gabon, which again I'll go into more detail as we go on. But where we've protected the gorillas in those areas, we've now created a huge safety for a lot of other animals, and all the other animals are thriving, because we won't let them go and not poach the gorillas, but go and poach a forest elephant, for example. So that's why. You also may protect larger populations. For example, again, out in the Gabon, we've had chimps now coming into our area. So we're protecting a larger population of not only the gorillas, but also chimps as well. You retain natural behaviour and selection, of course, so they can breed with whoever they want to breed with. And they don't lose natural behaviours. Unfortunately, in some zoos, you do get stereotypical behaviours and that kind of thing, whereas if you're in situ, you don't have that issue. They're exactly naturally behaving like they would do. You involve and educate local people and the benefits of the local economy. In the Gabon, we employ all the locals pretty much. We also use natural produce, so we're helping the area that we're in as well, that type of stuff. So you're always helping that kind of thing. Once set up, you've got lower costs as the population size increases as well. So there's loads of different advantages to in situ. Then you've also, of course, got disadvantages. You've still got those threats. You've still got poaching, you've still got disease, war, conflict and invasion of species. So we employ eco-guards over in the Gabon to protect all of those guys, but they can't be there all the time. There's only a handful of them that do it. So you still have that issue, whereas here, obviously, they're locked in cages. They don't have that issue of any of those threats. Very expensive setup costs. Most of the time you've got to talk with lots of government people, sort everything out that way, so it does get very, very expensive. And like it says again, just covered the next point. You may face opposition from local people. Most of the guards and things we employ now were actually once upon a time poachers. Once upon a time still as well, out in Africa for example, all the poachers were very in with the guards. So they'd say, right, there's an elephant over there, they'd go and poach it, and the guards would go, well, I don't know anything about it. So you have those issues as well. And you also have limited veterinary assistance. We don't have a vet on site in the Gabon as well, but if anything really, really does need extensive looking at it, our vet goes out there. Obviously we have to cost and stuff for that as well. Right. Ex situ. Normally focuses on critically endangered, often charismatic species, such as the stuff we've got here. Tigers, lions as well, of course, rhinos, gorillas, all that type of stuff. So the big stuff mainly. These are the species that all of the people in the zoos want to see. They don't want to see stuff like the frogs and the spiders, all that type of stuff. They want to see the big stuff. Of course, you've got the Disney factor, which is what you guys have come in for. But it also benefits because we bring in the money from the zoo here and it goes out to our projects overseas. So that's the benefit to that. All zoos were set up initially for a safety net. So we'll go into it later as well, but you've got the Przewalski's horses, which became extinct. They've been reintroduced from the captive population. European bison as well were again extinct, and they've been reintroduced. So we have that prime example of a safety net if we need it. And it also raises awareness of conservation issues. So doing stuff like this, we do talks around the park on a daily basis, trying to educate people and get more money into conservation. We've kind of covered all of that now. So you've got reduced threats, obviously, education, raises funds, veterinary care, basically pretty much similar to the others. Excuse me, haven't done this in a while. Might cough a lot. Right, it's more expensive than in situ. We have to feed all the animals. We've got to market it, so you guys come in, all that type of thing. So it is a lot more expensive. You've got staff costs, all that type of stuff. There is a huge element to running a zoo. Not quite as easy as it looks. Poor management, of course, leads leads to inbreeding, genetic adaptation to captivity, and the loss of natural behaviour. So we have to manage our animals. Several ways in which you manage your animals, stud books or that kind of thing, but you have to monitor it very closely, and you have to make sure that you know when each animal is in season so you can manage it properly. You've got smaller populations, of course. Few costly reintroductions. We can't really introduce these guys back to the wild. They've never known their wild habitat, except one of ours, who's a slight exception, Jala, but he still doesn't know his natural behaviour. I'll tell you again a little bit about that in a minute. Low breeding success. We're kind of different from that. We've never had that issue because that was why John Aspinall set them up the way he did. Big enclosures, spacious. If they want to get away, our animals can. So we've had every success with breeding, but some places don't, and it is an issue that you can face as well. Not enough global zoo space for all species. Obviously, we can't have every species in the world. We haven't got enough room. All the zoos can't either, so it is a disadvantage that you face. I've got a few brief notes on everything I've just gone over, basically. Right. So, this is the prime example of why we have zoos again. Anyone know what it is? Doesn't actually tell you, well done. Right, anyone know what it is? You passed some as you came in. Yay! Yeah, exactly. It's one of our Barbary lions. He is actually, I believe, the one that we walked past. Does anyone know why the one we walked past didn't have a mane? Who's been here before? You been here before?
That guy has.
Oh, damn it, you ruined it. But yeah, the last Barbary lion was actually shot in 1922. And this is a prime example of why we need to manage breeding. Because there's only 54. Barbary lions aren't going to be ever reintroduced to the wild. There's not enough of a genetic population to do it. So that's why we have to be careful with our breeding. Most people, when I say to them he's castrated, or say there's only 54, and they're like, why aren't you breeding him? Well, he's related to that female in there, so we don't want him to breed. That's not good. And most of the other Barbary lions as well have come from this park, so we don't want them to breed. Right, all of our initiatives that we've got in situ. You've got Madagascar. What do we protect in Madagascar? Yeah, you've all seen lemurs, black and white lemurs. We don't necessarily specify on black and whites at the moment, but we'll go into it as we go on. We've got some pretty pictures. Anyone know what they are? Yeah, you've got Langer in the corner. Yay! Make sure you're all awake and stop you taking notes. Anyone know what that is? No. Anyone? Yay, clouded leopard. Closest relation to the saber-toothed tiger. Anyone know that? Yeah. What type of rhino?
That's a black rhino.
Yay! You've all been here too much. That's a given that we don't read books. We do actually. It's a poodle. Anyone know what that is? And it's not a moggy. I will go into a little bit of detail about the Scottish wildcats, because that's not one I go into. But the Scottish wildcat at the moment is going through DNA tests. Because the Scottish wildcats roamed around Scotland quite a lot, they've bred with some of the moggies, and we want to find out which ones are the Scottish wildcats that we can protect, and then start breeding. So this is quite an early kind of thing that we're setting up at the moment. So they're all going through DNA testing, all of the ones past and present as well. So we need to make sure that we breed from the right ones, and then we can start reintroducing them back to Scotland in the right areas. Right, Madagascar Lemur project, our gorilla project, and Indonesia as well. Right, gorillas, threats to the wild population. Cool. Right, threats to the wild population. Does anyone know what threats to the wild population is?
Bushmeat.
Bushmeat, yeah. So, these guys get hunted for their meat. It's a delicacy out in Africa. Most of the people with a lot of money do it, mainly. But we set up a project over in the Gabon and the Congo in 1987. And we've taken orphan gorillas from that bushmeat trade, because if they kill the family, they won't kill the babies, because they can sell them into the pet trade, which I will go on to in a minute with the next slide. So we set it up working with the government and the Congo, obviously going through those procedures that I was telling you about earlier. We protect the area, that's with our eco guards that I was telling you about. We educate all the local people. We have guys that do a little displays, do educational talks like we do, trying to spread the word about gorilla conservation. So we have awareness over here, over in the Gabon, and pretty much globally as well. We're recognised quite well for our gorilla populations. Right, anyone know who this guy here is? Yeah, he's a silverback, I'll give you that one. This is Jala, who we are going to go see in a minute. I will tell you a little bit about him, but he was exactly what happened to him was his family were most likely slaughtered. He was found in the Gabon, tied to a barrel, having sticks and stones thrown at him. It's mainly what they do to baby gorillas. Baby gorillas, when they're about 2 years old, are about as strong as an average man. So most people can't control them, so they tie them up, put them in little cages or dump them somewhere. Jala was kind of rescued. A French vet actually found him, kept him for 2 years. So he got to that unruly stage, and she tried to find somewhere for him to go. She found out about John Aspinall, his aim to reintroduce them back to the wild, so she donated him to us. He stayed here for a little while. He's gone back and forth between both the parks. Originally we wanted him to realise he was a gorilla. Obviously he grew up with people, and he grew up hating people, mainly. He still does. There's a few people anyway. So he was in with a younger group initially, and then because he is from Africa, he has a very, very good bloodline. So we set up a breeding female group around him. And that's what he's doing at the moment. His latest baby is 6-7 months old now, and he's got, I think, another one on the way. So that's what we did with him. But he is a bit temperamental, so I will just fill in a little bit. When we go down there, we are going to go to the palace, and obviously there are quite a lot of you. You're quite intimidating. He may react slightly badly. He does like to throw things. Also, he doesn't like me, so you're kind of unlucky today. And he may start throwing stuff, but normally he just goes back in. If he does, just don't react, and if you can keep as quiet as you can, then hopefully he'll be calm and he'll just run back in. But yeah, he does get a bit temperamental at times. So, our reintroduction programs. We're not going to take Jala's group, for example, and stick them back in the wild. That wouldn't work. They don't know how to be wild gorillas, and they're also older females or that type of thing. We don't take babies away from their mum by any means. We only take them away if they're rejected by mums. So these guys you've got here are Udiki, Cookie and Tia is the little one in the middle, and they were rejected by their mums. Tia was actually born here. You'll see her mum, she's normally the one that sits there at the bottom by the palace going like this trying to get her food, and that's Tia's mum. But Udiki and Cookie were rejected by their mum at Howlett's. So we decided to take them back to the Gabon. It's a very, very long process, it takes quite a while. They started to go over to the Gabon when they were 2 years old. And that's when they started their intense training. Well, not training, but rehabilitation, shall we say. So, we don't treat these guys like babies, we treat them like gorillas. Gorilla keepers that have worked with them from years and years, and most of them are gorillas themselves, work with them and they teach them. They don't teach them, they don't hold them like babies like we do. They literally grip onto us and hold on, that type of stuff. But when they go back to the Gabon, you obviously have to get them there. So, we have to train them as such. But we're just basically desensitising them to the crate. With Loz being in there, she's the head gorilla keeper over at Howlett's. They don't realise when they get shut in that crate on the day that they fly off that anything's really different. Obviously they do because they're intelligent, but they're not stressed by it. And they also had familiar keepers go with them. One of our keepers from here, Ingrid, and Matt from Howlett's went with them. So they all had a familiar face. Tia was slightly different. She got to go on a plane with Richard Branson, which even our keepers didn't even get to go on. So she was a little bit different because she was a lot younger. She was 6 months old. You can see Matt feeding Tia there at the moment. Whereas Udiki and Cookie were 2. But we didn't want Tia to go at a later stage. We wanted her to be integrated into the group because we had quite a good group anyway. Cookie in the tree there is a male, and the 2 girls are obviously girls. So it worked out as he would be the silverback and they would be his breeding females. So that's the way it worked. Every day they get taken out into the forest, they learn how to be wild gorillas. We teach them what to eat, what not to eat, all that type of stuff. And you have to teach them exactly, you can't go, there you go, eat this. You have to teach them where it's come from. So for example, the new shoots in the tree are the best ones to eat. So you have to show them where you've got it from, try and eat it yourself, and then give it to them. And then eventually they'll learn that process and do it themselves. This is an established group that's already over there on an island, the Queebies. They're slightly different. Obviously with the in situ programs where we've reintroduced them, we've taken a big group back and we've actually got too many males. So we've had to separate some. We've got Sid on an island on his own, because we do have not enough females. But this group at the moment is kind of going through changes. We're going to wait and see what happens with them. It may be that some of the males take one female or a couple of females and split off into separate groups. It may be that one male steps up to the mark and pushes all of the youngsters away. If that is the case, then we'll have to look into other areas where we can put them, where they don't get in each other's ways. Java Primate Project. This is quite a new one that we're setting up at the moment, or is going through. These gibbons are known as the Javan gibbons or the mullet gibbons, which is on our signs. We will go past some when we go to the palace. Only 2,000 remain in the wild, so a very, very small amount that's left. They're only found in one area of Western Java, and they're only found, what are they only found in? Big high rainforest, I can't remember, my brain's gone blank. Anyway, there's only 4% of the forest left in Java, so that's all they've got left. So that's why we need to start protecting them. The reason that these guys, they're under threat is again the pet trade. Slightly different from a gorilla. You kill the female and take the baby, but what they do, they chain it to a tree. They don't go and change that chain size, so what they'll do, they'll attach it to it, and most likely when it grows up, the chain digs into its stomach, all that type of thing. So they have a lot of issues with it. So what we're doing at the moment, we've confiscated 4 gibbons and 4 langurs. We're actually full to breeding full at the moment until we brain's gone dead. Until we match them up and pair them up. But some of those guys won't go back to the wild. The first male that we took, he has a damaged leg and a damaged eye, so we can't reintroduce him. But what we'll do is we'll set up a breeding pair with him once we get a female that we can't reintroduce as well, which unfortunately most likely will happen. And then we'll release their offspring. So it's another way of reintroducing to the population as well. We've got 2 release sites as well. One area that's got quite a lot of gibbons in it, so most likely we won't use that until we've established exactly if there's any area left to put gibbons in. But one that's pretty much extinct of gibbons. There might be a family, but we're still going through research to find out good release sites. So that may be a possibility. Right, Madagascar Lemur Project. The greater bamboo lemur is the most threatened lemur species there is. There's only 200 of them left. We've got 2 in the park, one very grumpy one, Zeke. And there's only 22 in captivity. So what we're trying to do at the moment is go around all the sites where lemurs exist and reclassify them, protect them, so no one can get to them. And we've actually doubled the areas which these lemurs live, because we found them in different areas that weren't protected. So that's what we're going through at the moment. We will move on to other lemur species as well. For example, in captivity at the moment, black and white rough lemurs, which we have over at Howlett's, and we have some belters over here, aren't actually being bred in captivity because there's too many of them. But in the wild, they're one of the most critically endangered species behind these guys. So what we're going to do is aim to look at what we can do out in the wild rather than what we can do in zoos. So it's another thing that we have to look at. Also, we're going to look into the crowned shafakas. Anyone know what a crowned shafaka is? They're the ones that do the funny dance. They jump. I'm not going to do it because I look really stupid. But anyway, that's what we're going into. Right, how we manage our captive populations. What's the time, just by any chance? Okay, well, cool. As long as we don't get to 12 o'clock. If we do get to 12 o'clock, hopefully we don't, because I think you'll all be asleep by then. We need to go to the groups. Right, managing populations across zoos. Many zoos require each species, obviously, in order to spread the gene pool. We have that by managing places, Viaza, Iaza, and Waza. Never heard of that one. How we manage them? Obviously, stud books. Anyone know what a stud book is?
It's a way of managing the gene pool and which animals should go where and mate with which animals again.
Exactly. Did anyone know that a stud book is actually only a advisory thing? No one has to actually follow it in zoos. They don't have to if they don't want to. So that's another issue. Husbandry techniques that we do. Obviously moving our animals within the zoo and stuff like that. Recommend animal movements, like I said. That's to prevent inbreeding, retain genetic diversity, and requires the goodwill of participating zoos. Like I said, some zoos won't do it. We had a zoo a couple of years ago that were meant to give us 2 wild dogs, and they only gave us 1. So we do work within it if they don't want to do it, so it does most of the time work. Right, 2 levels based on threat. Lower threat is the single stud book keeper, and the high threat is a stud book keeper and a species committee, so it all depends. We have studbook keepers over here. For example, over here we've got the bush dog studbook holder. He does something else as well, and I can't remember what it is. He's my own boss, and I can't remember. Does another studbook here as well. We've also got the clouded leopard studbook holder over at Howlett's, and the mullet gibbon studbook holder as well. So we have a few. Our animal director is also the Barbary lion studbook keeper, because they've now been reintroduced into a breeding program. But examples of the studbook. Przewalski's horses, like I was telling you about. Does anyone know why the Przewalski's horses died out? No? I don't actually know, because I realised that's European bison. But anyway, we'll move on from that one swiftly. Right, they were, in 1996, pretty much extinct. Yeah, we'll go with that. And they were pretty much extinct. There was only 13 in the world. So what we did was we managed from a very, very small population. You are going to have issues with breeding from 13. It's never going to work rosily. But we used the captive breeding population to reintroduce them back to the wild. We sent some back over from here as well. But you have to be careful with Przewalski's as well. And what was actually done was they were bred with domestic horses to try and increase the genetic population. But you do have issues with them. For example, the vitamin E problems they have. They do have a deficiency in vitamin E. So that was one of the reasons why domestic horses were introduced, to try and get rid of that. You've got things going on like that at the moment, like in dogs, for example. Or the inbreeding, they're going to try and outbreed them. So it's that kind of thing. You now have 1,500 in the captive population, but still only 325 in the wild. But hopefully that population will manage itself as well as other people managing. An example of a studbook, that makes no sense to me whatsoever, I'm not going to lie. We'll just keep going. Barbary lions. There's only 65 of them in the wild, left. 65 is a rough estimate, again, because studbook holders have no rights. They can write to a zoo and say, how many lions have you got? They don't have to reply. And that's mainly what our studbook holder at the moment is having issues with. Not everyone replies, so he just has to estimate. So, inbreeding is mating with another of a common ancestry. So, for example, if Layla and Jabir were to breed, not good. Unavoidable in small populations, obviously with the Barbary lions, but we manage it. And we, for example, got a new pair up at the top, Milo, our male, who is the offspring from our guys. We've got a female in from Madrid. So that's the way we're going to do it. But she is probably somewhere related, but the least amount as possible. Increased by isolation and lack of dispersary, another reason. Measured by inbreeding coefficient. That goes into it more in the next slide. Right. This makes more sense of what was on the other side slightly. So you have to look at whether they're unrelated, whether they're brother and sister, mother and son, all that type of stuff. You have to look into it and see as little as possible. So you have issues with it. You're going to have fertility is going to be an issue. You're going to shorten their lifespan, shorter the amount of animals that they breed, they create, shall we say, and all that type of stuff. So you do have a lot of issues with it. That makes no sense to me, small people. Right, you must rotate your stock internally and externally. And also, if you do have a little accident with inbreeding, it's important that you then stop it there rather than just keep going. So all that type of thing, because sometimes accidents do happen. You can't stop it all the time. Right, so past breeding was selected for the easiest individuals to breed and work with, but it also has to be looked at in different ways. Lead to domestication and the loss of behaviour. So with the Scottish wildcats, for example, they've become more domesticated, so we need to take them back to their wild ancestry, all that type of stuff. Natural selection versus artificial selection, you must rotate the stock, same thing. Yeah, it's all basically the same stuff, so we'll just keep going. And then, if you manage your populations right, you can end up with cute little red river hogs, cute little rhinos, wild dogs, there you go, you're all meant to go, oh, you only got it. Captive breeding and reintroduction involves 6 stages. So, initially you get the decline of the wild population, and founding of a captive population, the growth of the captive population to secure size, that gene pool I was talking to you about, or safety net, shall we say. Management of captive population over generations, so we make sure that they're not breeded as much to whoever. Selection of individuals for reintroduction, so like I said, the ones that aren't raised by mums are easiest. And then the management of the reintroduction program, like we've got continually all the time going on over in the Gabon and the Congo. Again, a little chart telling you how long it takes. And maintaining natural behaviour. We have loads of researchers, university students, all that type of stuff that go around monitoring animals. Obviously all the keepers know their natural behaviours and all that type of stuff. So we try and encourage it as much as we can. I understand you guys went down to look at enrichment for the gorillas. So we do different stuff like that, giving them honey pots. They use sticks and things to try and get it out. Making them use their brains a little bit more than they would, because obviously they'd roam around huge amounts of forest. We can't give them that. We let them roam around the zoo. We wouldn't have a zoo left. So we do different stuff like that. We look at feeding behaviours, the social dynamics. We don't tend to have to do a lot of enrichment because we're quite lucky. We're able to have groups together and very big groups. So they don't need too much enrichment because they have each other, but obviously we do quite a lot anyway. Locomotion of use of their environment, stereotypical behaviour. We obviously try and prevent that as best as we can. But some behaviours that people look at that they think are stereotyping, like tigers for example, walking around their enclosures, it's not stereotyping, it's doing what they naturally would. They would naturally patrol their areas, so that's what they're doing most of the time. Tug does it a lot at the top. Communication. But how is it important in conservation terms? Obviously, if we know what they do naturally, we can make sure that we fit to that. So, researching behaviour gives an understanding of how individuals and groups interact with each other, their environment, food, water and shelter, and other species. So again, we're going to set up a Java primate project. We know exactly what they use, what part of their enclosures they use. For example, gibbons are going to use the highest part of their enclosure because they swing up in the trees. So we do that type of stuff. Researching behaviour in the wild and captive environment allows behaviour comparison. So we can see that our guys are behaving as naturally as they can do. Important for enrichment design and deployment, design of enclosures and problems during reintroduction. This kind of goes into a little bit more about what we were talking about earlier with the frogs and all that type of stuff. With all the difficulties associated with reintroduction, are there some species easier to reintroduce than others? So, for example, a snake or a reptile or an amphibian, they know exactly what they're meant to do. So they exhibit predominantly innate behaviour. They need limited or no parental care and do not learn from their parents. So we, at some point a long, long time ago, did reintroduce Burmese pythons. You find the right area, find where they're going to exist, and you go, there you go. Whereas gorillas, you can't do that. If you do that, they're basically going to get poached or they're not going to survive. So there are things that you can do a lot easier than others. Therefore, it would be logical for parks and zoos to keep, breed and reintroduce these species, which we don't do anymore, but that's not the point. However, fewer people would visit then and less money would be available for in-situ conservation. So again, it's having the right megafauna for you guys to look at. Because if we had a zoo full of snakes and spiders, only a very select few would come. Most people are scared of them. More of the same from us humans. We need to be cutting down less of their habitat. Does anyone know what palm oil is? Yeah? Who can tell me what palm oil is? Yeah, exactly. Pretty much everything. Exactly. It's cutting down the forest and the habitat of orangs, the gibbons, Malayan tapirs that we've got here, pretty much everything. And we're the reason for it. If you guys go home and look at stuff that you've got at home, body creams, girls' makeups, biodiesel and everything. Supposedly biodiesel is going to save the world. It's not really going to save the world if you chop down all the trees in order to do it. So there are huge issues that still need to be looked at and ways of identifying, for example, things with palm oil. I know myself, I've got stuff with palm oil in, but I didn't realise it was in it. So if we had labelling, for example, you could make sure people divert from that and then hopefully the demand would go down and they wouldn't do it as much. Overexploitation of areas. Disease spread by humans and domestic species. Obviously gorillas are pretty much the same as us, so we can spread disease quite easily. Critically endangered species removed from their native habitat into captivity. Obviously amphibians, if it needs to be done with chytrid fungus, it could be done. There are different zoos around I think the Durrell Conservation Trust are doing it at the moment. They're taking some in to breed them, then hopefully reintroduce them when there isn't so much of a threat. Increased pressure on zoo space. We at the moment are pretty much up to maximum. We have to shuffle animals around at the moment and get rid of some in order to bring new in. So we always have to do it, all zoos have to. DNA banks for species revival, so the Scottish wildcats for example. Does this give out the wrong impression? An army of conservation is needed. There always is. There's not enough of us. There are many conservation successes to remember. For example, we've now reintroduced 53 gorillas back to the wild. And we've got an 80% survival rate, which is a huge amount bigger than what anyone thought we would ever do. They thought pretty much we were going to fall on our bums and not succeed, but we have. So there are several things that do work. We learn from them to ensure the current and future projects are successful, if not more so. So we started off with the Gabon and the Congo, and we're now moving on to Java and different things, and the Lima projects. So that we started on with a success, and we're going to keep going, and hopefully keep having success. We must remember all species are important. You've got the plants, spiders, birds, slugs, snails, wasps, mice, aardvarks, and obviously it goes on. We need to look after everything, not just the big stuff. But yeah, so that's pretty much me done. Hopefully there's a bit of time for questions if I can fill stuff in, if I haven't bored you all to sleep. But obviously the best animal in the park is of course the tapirs, which you probably won't see.